When I woke up, there was a man standing in the corner of my bedroom. At least I thought it was a man. He was darker than the shadows around him, and he didn't move, even when I whispered, even when I sat up. I blinked, but he was still there, watching. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, a trick of the light, the residue of a dream that wouldn't leave me, but the air felt wrong. Heavy, cold. I could feel it pressing in around me. I told myself to breathe, slow and steady, but the sense of being watched only grew stronger. I forced myself out of bed, my feet cold against the wooden floor, and as I moved closer, he vanished. No trace. Only darkness in that corner, impossibly deep, as if the shadows themselves were alive. I told myself it was nothing, a leftover from a dream, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, had entered my room while I slept. The next morning I went about my day, but everything felt off. The light from the sun didn't reach the corners of my apartment the way it used to. Shadows clung to the walls and furniture like thick, dark stains. At work, I kept seeing movement in the periphery of my vision. A figure standing just beyond my desk, or leaning against a wall in the hallway, only to disappear when I turned. My coworkers didn't see anything, of course, and I began to wonder if I was losing my mind. That night, I slept with every light in my apartment on. I couldn't let him return. I told myself I would ignore it, that if I confronted the fear, it would vanish. But fear isn't rational. It waits. It learns. And he did. I woke in the middle of the night to hear the floorboards creak, slow, deliberate. My bedroom door was closed when I went to bed. Now it was slightly ajar. I stared at the darkness beyond, heart hammering, until I saw him, just standing there, not moving, not breathing, darker than any shadow I had ever seen. And then he tilted his head. I cannot explain the feeling that passed over me, like a cold finger tracing my spine. He knew I was awake. He was learning me. Sleep became a torment. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt him closer, leaning over me, invisible yet suffocating. I began sleeping in the living room, lights on, doors locked, curtains drawn. Yet even there he found me. Shadows flickered in corners where no light reached. On more than one occasion, I woke to see shapes moving at the edge of my vision. Figures that were only half there, silhouettes that seemed to bleed into the floor and walls, watching, waiting. I started documenting these sightings, keeping a notebook with timestamps and descriptions, desperate to prove to myself that it wasn't me. The Hat Man appeared next. I hadn't expected him. A taller figure, a wide-brimmed hat casting a shadow that completely obscured his face. He moved differently from the others, patiently, purposefully. I caught glimpses of him in mirrors, reflections showing angles I knew should be empty. My reflection moved slower than I did, or sometimes not at all, as if he had replaced it, observing me through my own eyes. I would turn, heart racing, and the room would be empty, yet I knew he had been there, watching, studying, learning. I began to notice changes in myself. Shadows seemed to stick to me, following me like stains, always present, always stretching longer than they should, creeping across floors and walls. I would glimpse something standing just outside the reach of my vision, a dark figure, taller than any human, tilting its head in that same unnerving way. I could feel it when I blinked. I could feel it when I tried to sleep. It was inside my mind, pressing against the edges of my thoughts, whispering in a language I could not understand but could feel in my bones. Friends stopped calling. Work stopped asking questions. They didn't notice the exhaustion or the fear. I was alone and yet not. The shadows were always there, always moving, always patient. They had no faces, yet I could feel their attention, piercing me like 1,000 invisible needles. I began recording audio at night, hoping to capture something, anything. On one recording I heard it, a faint, low whisper like the sound of air moving through dead leaves, but rhythmic, intentional. It pressed against my eardrums, echoing in my skull. I replayed it until my mind began to fracture, until I could no longer tell if I was hearing it or imagining it. Days merged into nights. I stopped sleeping. I stopped blinking when possible. I avoided mirrors. I avoided corners. I could feel them pressing closer, surrounding me. The Hat Man leaned into my peripheral vision, always patient, waiting. I could see him in the darkened reflections of my phone screen standing behind me. Watching, waiting, I tried to leave. I thought moving would help. New city, new apartment. But the first night the shadows came. They never sleep. They never leave. The darkness is never empty. I have written this down because I cannot speak. I cannot explain. I have no one left. They are here, always, watching, patient, learning. I catch glimpses of him even now, tilting his head, taller, wider, impossibly black. I cannot sleep. I cannot hide. Every shadow is alive. Every dark corner is a doorway. I can feel him reaching, stretching into my mind, and I know that eventually he will consume me. If you are reading this, know one thing. He is there, always patient, waiting, watching. Shadows are not empty. They never were. And I am already too late.